everyone, my name is Hickman. I'm an associate solicitor in the immigration team at Bindmans. I'm here with the second edition of our new podcast, Immigration Unpacked, where we're talking about all things immigration and citizenship related. And today I'm talking to my colleague, Elisabeth Attwood, who's another solicitor in the team. She's our resident expert on the EU settlement scheme. And today we're going to be talking about the settlement scheme, automatic extensions and curtailment. Good morning, Elisabeth.
Hello.
Hello. Talking about automatic extensions under the EU settlement scheme. So can you tell us a bit what that means? Tell us a bit about the settlement scheme and in particular what are automatic extensions about?
Okay, so everyone knows about Brexit, I hope.
Yes.
Before Brexit, before the UK left the EU, the Home Office set up a scheme with other European countries, which allowed EU nationals and their family members to apply for permission to continue living in the UK after Brexit. And this was called the EU settlement scheme. The way it worked was that if an EU national or their family member had been living in the UK for 5 years before Brexit, they would be granted settled status if they made an application to the scheme. Settled status is the same as indefinite leave to remain. If they had been living in the UK for less than 5 years, they were granted pre-settled status, and that was a temporary period of leave of 5 years. And once they reached the end of that 5 years, they were asked to make a new application to the EU settlement scheme if they wanted to continue living here. And if they met the requirements, the residence requirements, and any other requirement actually, they would then be granted settled status, i.e. indefinite leave to remain. So the original rule, as I'd said, was that the government expected people who had pre-settled status to make a second application before that leave came to an end for indefinite leave to remain. In December 2022, the High Court heard a challenge to this rule, and they decided that people with pre-settled status could not be required to make a new application, a second application, in order to stay at the UK at the end of their initial 5-year period of residence.
Okay, so just to make sure I've understood this correctly, if they could apply for settled status in the past, they did. If they didn't qualify, they applied for pre-settled. But then in order to switch over to settled, so the right to live here permanently, the government was making them make another application. So they made their first application and the government said, oh, you have to make another application for settled.
Yes.
And then the court case said, you know, people shouldn't have to make a second application. You should sort it out. That ties into the automatic extensions because
the government had to find a way to deal with this, how they were going to deal with people who'd been here but had not made an application to tell them that they'd been here for a period of 5 years. So what they did was they decided that they would automatically extend everybody's pre-settled status before it expired. Now, that was initially for 2 years, and then they decided the extension would be for 5 years. And that extended period, I think the purpose of it was to give them time to establish whether people were entitled to be granted indefinite leave to remain, settled status, or whether they weren't.
Okay, awesome. So these extensions were really for the Home Office's purpose. It didn't mean that the Home Office had looked at anything. They were just extending so that the Home Office could then have enough time to carry out this assessment about upgrading to settled status.
Yeah.
And so that case was in December 22, I think you said. And when did the government start doing these extensions? Was it like last year, the year before?
I think it was a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
A couple of years ago, more or less.
Yeah.
So what's changing?
They've been going on for quite a long time now.
They've been going on for a while. So kind of why are we talking about this now?
Okay, so I think at the end of this year, what they've indicated is they're going to start actively looking at people whose leave has been extended to see whether they have enough information in their own records to automatically grant them settled status.
Okay, so that's going to start happening from the end of the year. They're going to start looking at these undecided applications, these people who've been extended.
That's my understanding. And so when they check their own records, what this means is they're going to look at tax records, benefits records, and travel information to see what they've got and whether that's enough for them to grant. If it is enough for them, a person will be granted indefinite leave to remain. And if it's not enough for them, they will, well, potentially curtail someone's leave, but there'll be steps in between. What's slightly worrying is they're also going to be looking at whether they think someone was incorrectly granted pre-settled status in the first place.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
And that may cause people difficulties if they decide they made a mistake in their initial decision.
Okay, so there's two things you mentioned there that we need to follow up on. The first is you mentioned curtailment, and you said people's leave could be curtailed. So what is curtailment, and what does it mean for people in practical terms?
Well, in practical terms, what it means is people will be given an opportunity to respond if the Home Office decides it doesn't have enough information about them to grant their leave. So what they've said they will do is, I'm not quite answering your question, but I'll get to it. What they've said they'll do is write to people and say, we don't think we've got enough evidence that you've been living here continuously for 5 years, and they will give them a short opportunity to provide them with evidence. Now, if they don't respond or their evidence isn't good enough, that's when we get to curtailment. And what this means is the Home Office will say, you have X number of days to either make an application on a different route. For example, if you're working here, they'd say make an application as a skilled worker, or I don't know, or as a family member, for example. And if they can't or don't make an application under another route, they will either have to leave voluntarily, or they run the risk of removal from the UK.
So curtailment is when their existing permission is ended by the Home Office, and then it follows from that. They then have to sort things out another way, either by leaving or making a new application, but they would be notified of that.
They would be notified of that.
And they would be given time to put in another application. And then you mentioned, well, I guess the next question is, who do people need to start worrying? Is there anything like do people need to be worried about this? Is this a cause for alarm, do you think?
So I think when we've spoken about this before, I've said that I don't think people need to be worried. They just need to take action. But in the last couple of weeks, The Guardian reported that more than 28,000 people had their child benefits stopped because the Home Office held incorrect travel records or incomplete travel data about them. So they were wrongly recorded as having emigrated from the UK when they hadn't. So while I'd still say don't worry, I do think people need to be aware that the Home Office does make mistakes. And so I would say it's really important that they keep detailed records of their travel in and out of the UK, bank statements showing spending in the UK, make sure those can be downloaded, make sure you have access to pay slips, benefits records, what else, tenancy agreement, anything you've got to show that you've been here, because I think now more than ever, it's clear that we can't necessarily rely on the Home Office's own records to be accurate.
Sadly, I do know that's true. Can I just I think my next question was going to be what steps people can take to protect themselves, but I think you've kind of answered that. You've said,
well, I've missed one critical thing, which is that before you even get into being able to supply the Home Office with your records, you need to make sure that you receive any correspondence for them. So if your email address has changed or your passport number's changed or your phone number's changed, you must update the Home Office so that you know when they're raising a query with you.
And Elisabeth, do you think there would be any benefit to people, rather than they can still apply for settled status, would there be any benefit in them making that application themselves before the Home Office gets around to looking at it? Or do you think it's best just to sit back and wait?
No, I would always advise people to make an application proactively, because then you're in control of it. You're in control of the evidence they have.
Right.
And you're not on the back foot. You're not trying to answer a sort of accusation is the wrong word from them,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
there's
negative.
missing information.
Okay.
And you have some certainty, you know when this is going to come. You're not going to be scrabbling around at the last minute trying to get things together, which may be difficult to find, because obviously, you know, 5 years is a long time.
It is. So to summarize, you think that people should make sure they keep all their records. So bank statements, pay slips, council tax, bills, I don't know, school letters. So don't assume that the Home Office will have anything, accept that they might make mistakes. So keep all your records, make sure that all your contact details with the Home Office are always up to date. And if possible, apply for settled status as soon as you think you're eligible, rather than just relying on the fact your pre-settled has been extended. Is that
Exactly.
that's okay? Thank you. And
Because
then
applications are still free, by the way, to make. So there's no downside in
there's no
doing it
loss to doing
proactively.
it. Okay, and yeah, compared to some other kinds of Home Office applications, they're actually not that bad, not that awful
No.
to make. But there is support out there for people who get a bit overwhelmed. And I just want to come back to something else you mentioned in passing. And you might not really have any information about this, but it caught my attention because I didn't know this was happening. You said that the government is reassessing people who have pre-settled status, whether that's been granted in error. I didn't quite understand that.
I don't know whether this is automatically part of the process, but they
Right.
will and have the power to look at the original application. And if they think they made an incorrect decision about someone's pre-settled status, i.e., that they didn't meet the requirements at the time they applied, they can also curtail leave on that basis. So you can't think to yourself, oh, I've got it and this is secure forever.
Fine. Right.
So really just try and you know, it's difficult, as I say, 5 years is a long time. Make sure you're fully on top of what you told them in the first place about your application, right, and why you were eligible then.
Okay. Well, thanks. That's really helpful. Also slightly alarming, but people should do what they can to kind of protect themselves up front and not be caught on the back foot.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it
but
for
as
now.
You say, Karma.
Yeah, go
on. This is a route which traditionally has been slightly more sort of applicant friendly. So yeah. I'll go back to please don't worry, because I think that, you know, just as long as you're on top of it, the government may give you the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I think I would add as well that they do take it seriously, but it's not quite as brutal as some other parts of the Home Office are. And generally they will try, and I think they are open to being persuaded of things, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're legally obliged to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yes, they are, of course. Okay, right. I am going to call it there. Thank you, Elisabeth. We'll be back in a couple of weeks and we'll be looking at another immigration issue. I don't know what that will be as yet, but watch this space. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.